All right, here we go. Deb is not here today, but that's okay because I'm really excited. I'm always excited for our guests, but I was just telling our guest tonight that I'm actually really interested in talking to her tonight because of what she does. Tonight, we have the founder of the Hope Booth, Gloria Umanah. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm super excited. We just got off of our tour, and so I'm like ready to get back in the groove of things. And so I feel like everything's pretty fresh in my heart and my mind right now. So I'm super excited for this interview.
I love that. I'm so excited to talk to. I was just telling you, this is probably. I think I called you the most unique guest. That might have been the wrong way to word it, but I think you're the guest that maybe is doing one of the more unique things that we've ever had on this podcast. So I'm really excited for people to hear what you guys do. But before we jump into that, first of all, did I get your last name right?
You did?
Yes.
Good
I,
work.
Thank you. I do this all the time. I'm like, don't forget to ask how to pronounce the name, and then I press record, and then I go. I'm like, oh no, I didn't ask, and then I have to like cross my fingers and hope that I didn't mess it up. So I'm glad that I got this one. That's
It's very
good.
close.
Good. Okay. No more pressure then. So we always like to start off the show by explaining how we're connected to our guests. And you and I literally met 2 minutes ago when we started the Zoom call. But we've been following you in Hope Booth for a little while. And I'm trying to think back. I believe I became aware of what you guys were doing because I saw one of our previous guests, Sho Baraka, his story. Does that sound right? Do you know Sho?
Yeah, that would make sense.
Okay, perfect. That I'm like I was trying to really think about how we're connected, but I think I saw him share something about you guys on one of his Instagram stories. I'm like, okay, well, I have a ton of respect for Show, so I want to see what it's all about. And then I'm like, oh, this is incredible. So it's pretty simple. We're basically connected through social media, and so that's one of
Amazing. It's
the
the
beautiful
power of
things.
social media in such a small world, too.
Oh yeah. Well, and obviously that's social media is a weird thing, right? Because you hear it all the time. It can be such a destructive thing and it can just tear people down. But then there's like this whole other side to it that is, I think, really beautiful. It helps people get connected from all across the country, all across the world, share ideas, share hope, and so all these different things. And it's just like you just have to kind of rise above all the negative stuff. That way you can see, the things that are awesome about social media. But enough about that. Tell us a little bit about who you are, and can you explain a little bit about what the Hope Booth is and how you came up with it?
For sure. That's a lot of information you just asked for, and I don't think you even realize it.
No, I do that sometimes, but I'm ready. Go for it.
Yeah, so for anyone who has no clue who you're listening to, my name is Gloria Umanah, and I live in Atlanta, Georgia. And I get this unique opportunity of being the visionary and spearheading something called the Hope Booth. And so what the Hope Booth is essentially is a 3-minute interactive immersive experience where we've used art and technology intertwined together to deliver artistic messages of hope. And we do it in the form of remodeled phone booths. And so our goal and vision really is to pioneer this movement where no one goes unseen. And we hope to one day have these hope booths literally all over the world installed permanently in prisons and hospitals and street corners and universities and just anywhere where people are, because we believe that all people deserve to be seen and all people are in need of hope. And so we created the Hope Booth. Really, the idea and thought came to mind in 2020. I was leading a ministry of creatives that specifically were honed in on spoken word artistry. And so we would travel in crews of 2 to 3 to 4 to help tell stories in really beautiful and powerful ways with churches and universities and nonprofit organizations and conferences and camps and just all over the US. And in 2020, we had this crazy moment, like we all did,
Yeah.
pandemic hit us and it ended all of our events. So a lot of what we did was on stages. And so every single one of our events was canceled. And I began thinking to myself, surely a pandemic can't cancel out the beauty and power of creativity. There's got to be a way to still do what we do and impact people differently. And so I think as innovators, naturally, when we see problems, like our first instinct is to find solutions. And so I began just really thinking and praying and asking the Lord to give me an idea of like how we could move forward. And so this is when I kind of heard the statistic that the average person living on the streets those 3 to 6 months without being looked in the eye. And I remember hearing that for the first time, and it was so gut punching to me. And I think the more I recollect that statistic in my mind, the more I'm uncomfortable with myself. And I live in Atlanta, Georgia. This is a high place for homelessness. And I think about my own personal story and realizing, though I've never been homeless, there are times in my lives where I felt invisible, where I felt unseen, and where I felt as though I didn't matter. So much so that I almost ended my life about 11 years ago. And so I began to think to myself, how can I pioneer this movement where people feel convicted to do the hard work of seeing others? And so really the Hope Booth in essence it's a catalyst for a larger movement. We say this often on our team, is that it's bigger than the booth. We hope that one day people begin to realize like, oh, I can rise up and do this work. But until then, our hope and goal is that the Hope Booth would encourage other people to do the hard work. But also I think, for other people to see other people, it takes them knowing that they're seen. And so giving people this opportunity in unique ways to meet them where they are, to simply be seen and to be encouraged and find hope, even in the midst of all of the craziness that this world has to offer. And so it's been a wild and exciting journey. And it's been really amazing. So it's been cool. I love it.
Man, I feel like we could just stop the podcast right there. This might be like the shortest podcast ever, because that was amazing. So many good things that you just said right there. I'm not even sure where to start. First of all, I love what you said. I'm not going to be able to word it or say it word for word, but you said the pandemic can't stop the creativity or something to that. You said it way better than that, but that's a really interesting idea, because I'm sure for some people it's interesting, and you would probably be able to speak to this better than I would as a creative. I feel like for some people, the pandemic really did put a halt to their creativity, to maybe their dreams, maybe the things that inspire them. I mean, it just really put like a dead end stop to everything they were pursuing. And then it seems like for some people, and it seems like you're one of them, it actually kind of painted people in a corner, and it forced them to get even more creative with the things that they were doing. And then all of these amazing ideas came out of it. So that's really interesting. I love that you said that, because I think the creativity thing was a really fascinating part of this whole pandemic.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like the crew is very 50-50, just kind of like what you explained. And I feel like the dividing factor in essence is almost the why. I think people who had a very shallow why, they lost their creativity because it was based upon something that wasn't bigger than themselves. But people who found a way to be even more creative, I think those people had a pretty large why. And I think the big thing about I think creativity is figuring out, how do I do something that's bigger than myself? And I think that's been the beauty and power of how Hope Booth came about, and why I think it was even a thought in our minds during a time when everything's falling apart. It's really hard for our minds to work when everything's falling apart unless we're thinking of a bigger why. And so I think that's kind of what helped catapulted innovative idea in general.
That's amazing. Well, and hope is such an amazing thing. I think hope is it's one of those things that we hear all the time. It's always, I feel like it's always a theme in so many movies, like this idea of hope and what hope can do for you, how hope can get you through, how sometimes the lack of hope is the most destructive thing that a person can go through, because it's, I mean, there's like, what are you looking forward to? What are you pursuing? Right. And so the fact that your booth is the Hope Booth is such a cool thing. And it's all 3 minutes.
Yeah.
And, anybody who, I would encourage you, pause the podcast, go follow the Hope Booth on Instagram right now, because like I said, we've been following you guys for a little while. And as you guys are going on your tour, it really is amazing seeing some of the reactions of people as they have the headphones on, they're looking at the images within this booth, and you see people with just tears right down their face. This is 3 minutes. It's 3 minutes. You have people that are going to counseling sessions and going to see therapists, and they're not, cracking tears like that. Right. And they're seeing that therapist for like an hour, and you guys are able to tap into that in 3 minutes. So, what was it like? What was it like putting together? I mean, it sounds like you've worked with a lot of these artists that are part of this project for a while, but like, what was it like when you pitched this idea to the entire team? Were people skeptical? Were they like, oh, I'm down, let's do this? Like, what was the reaction like?
That's a great question. So I had this idea July of 2020, and I only told one person on our team. And we met every single week working on it and just trying to strategize and figure out how do we make this make sense and flesh it out. And to be honest, it wasn't even for the sake of we want to make this happen next year.
Yeah.
We really weren't even thinking anytime soon. Our brains were like, oh, maybe like 2025. It sounds so futuristic, to be honest. So we were like, oh, maybe like 2025, 2026, we'll create this booth, whatever.
Yeah.
And so December came, and I mean, for me, like a lot of my creativity is driven very much by my faith and my beliefs. And I strongly felt like God was telling me that it was the perfect timing for us to pivot from the stage to the streets. There are people that need to know that they are seen. And so that's when I felt this sense of urgency. And I was like, I got to tell the team this project. The more I worked on it, I was like, surely I can't do this by myself and not me and the one person at the meeting. And so I was like, all right, great. I'm going to tell our team at the team retreat that we have every year at the beginning of the year. So January came, and I tell the team, and they're like mind blown. Like, some people are confused. Some people are excited. Some people are expectant. Some people are like, I'm kind of scared. I want out. Like, this is too much. And so it was really interesting, I think, because I feel like this is when we realize, again, that same dividing factor that crushed people's creativity and catapulted people's creativity in 2020. When I told the team about how big this was and how limited our resources are as a team that is 100% minority, it sounds like a task that is literally impossible in every possible way. And so we did lose people. And to this day, I think it's so interesting because less than a year later, it's like, look what happened. Like, with just a little bit of faith, a little bit of momentum and belief, like in the right people, and our team's not large. It's like, look at what can happen. And so I look back and I'm like, man, I'm grateful for the people who had enough belief in something that's bigger than themselves, because I think when we are fighting on behalf of other people want to be invited into that story, because people do want to be a part of something bigger than themselves. And so I think that's been the beauty of like Hope Booth and how it's even happened. None of this makes any sense that a crew of 7 to 11, 20-something year old Black and Hispanic kids could create something that is shifting the trajectory of so many people's lives in a year. Like, it's wild and unbelievable, to be honest, but it's been really, really amazing.
Yeah, well, that's so true. Like, I don't really think about it because I like when I look at your guys' Instagram and social media and all that, the way it's all put together, what you guys are doing, I'm just in my mind, like subconsciously thinking, oh, they've been doing this for 10 years. And really, you know what I'm saying? And to hear you guys have only been doing this for a little over, or just over like a year and a half, 2 years.
So we created the Hope Booth, technically October is when we debuted it in London. So it hasn't been a year yet. In July, it'll be a full year since we started working on it.
Dang, it's just wild. But it's, like I said, it's so cool to see the reactions. And I'm sure as you were as you threw this out to the team, obviously you said some people, weren't buying in, so they left. But I imagine when you saw that group of people that are like looking at you face to face saying, yeah, let's do this. That has to have been, that's, like you said, I believe that, there are those things that are put on our hearts and our minds for a purpose. And that had to have been such like a confirming thing when you had these people around you. It's like, okay, yeah, we're onto something, because not this many people would buy in if there was nothing here.
Absolutely. And I'll even say there's like two sides to the same coin there. Like, part of it that's confirming, and then there's another part of it that's like, shoot, it would have been easier if everyone was like, no, then we don't have to do this. And now it's like, okay, there are people on board and they're entrusting me to pioneer something that there's not a blueprint for. And so there is this like level of like weight. You're carrying this weight and you have people following you, and you're going into territories you've never even seen before. So it is very, I would say, scary. Scary is the word. It is very scary. I think that's just leading in general. But I think that's what, visionaries and leaders are called to big things and you've got to have boldness for it.
Right. Well, yeah, and I think I heard someone say you have to be okay with, being a leader, a trailblazer. You have to be okay with being the one that maybe fails a few times before something goes right. Like you have to be okay with that because, like you said, you're going into there's no blueprint. You're going into territory where, you're the one that's creating the blueprint, right? So like anybody who comes in after you, for your team, they get to kind of ride the wave that you're creating. But yeah, it's a great example of just leadership and what it takes to be a leader and that fearlessness. So I love hearing that. So with your first stop, so take me through your very first stop. Okay, you've put in all this work, all this creativity, you have this product, this phone booth that you're ready to go with, and like you're driving to the first location. Like walk us through that first day and what that whole thing was like.
Yeah, so we met up with our team there were 6 of us on the tour, 4 of which are on the Hope Booth team, and then 2 were brought on for the tour.
Okay.
And we spent a couple days already in Nashville, just kind of preparing and planning and walking through things together as a team for the first time ever all together. And we get in our RV to head to a university in Nashville. And on the way, we crashed the RV.
Oh, no.
One of the girls driving this RV like this is a game of Need for Speed and this is a Mini Cooper. And I'm like, guys, we've got to make wide turns. And so we already crashed in the first 5 minutes. And I'm like, shoot, we've got 29 more days left. Like,
oh, no.
Let this be good. And so we finally arrive and everyone's just like excited. We don't know what to expect. Like I would say we had a teaser of this at our debut in London, but this was just going to be different. We knew it was going to be different because our first stop was actually a university and we haven't done that before. And so we show up, and I think for me, what was going through my heart and my mind was instantly imposter syndrome. I think like right in these moments where what you've created comes to life, there's this thought of, was this just a cool idea or is this actually going to be impactful?
Yeah. And
I'm looking at the booth before, like, as we setting up, I'm looking at the booth, I'm looking at the people and I'm like, will this really change anyone? Like, is this going to do anything? And all of these thoughts are racing through my head. And I'm like choosing, okay, am I going to let these thoughts steal the moment of all this time and energy and effort that we've put into this? Or am I going to just really enjoy what I know works? And so I was like, all right, let's enjoy this and let's kill the lies. And so we killed the lies and we set it to the side. And the first person that experiences it, she is in tears in the first 20 seconds. And I'm just watching the experience from afar. We have like a GoPro that's in there that helps tell the story from a few different angles. And I have the iPad where I can see the GoPro. And she's like shaking, like her body is shaking. And in my mind, I'm like, what is going on? I need to know her story. And so after everyone experiences the Hope Booth, they have the opportunity to chat with one of our artists on the team and just kind of share their thoughts about the experience. And she shares that this was the words that she needed exactly because a year ago from that day, her mom committed suicide and her mom's name was Hope. And she said that this was the most confirming thing that could have happened. And in my mind, I'm sitting there and I'm like, of course this is impactful. This is not just a cool idea because it's bigger than Gloria Umanah. And I remember just in that moment, I was like, oh yeah, this is it. Like that's exactly what I think we all needed to just know, like, yeah, we're on the right path here. Like this is something really big and really impactful. And so it's been really cool because I think there's times where we have to delineate the difference between impressive and impactful. And I think in that moment, I realized beyond the art and like the beauty of like what the booth looks like and what it actually is impactful. And I think that was huge for us as creators to witness.
That's interesting. See, I'm struggling right now because I want to ask you so many questions about creativity specifically, but I want to stay focused on the Hope Booth. But what you just said, I thought was really fascinating because I know I've talked about this with like musicians before that we've had on the show. I understand there's this balance between you wanting to do something that's really dope and really creative and really push the boundaries of creativity. But like you can't do so much that you lose the content and the
Yeah.
message, and
Yeah.
where people stop focusing on that. And especially for what you guys are doing, I imagine there is a battle between the two things, because you guys are creatives. You can't, it's not like you can just turn it off. It's like, I'm going to stop being creative right now and just focus on the message. Like, no, it's like you are always creative. But like you said, the main thing is the message, and the message of hope. And so how do you do that without, like, be as creative as possible without losing the message of hope? So how much of a battle was that for you guys to, like I said, present it in a really amazing way, but then also making sure that the main thing stays the main thing?
Yeah, that's a great question. I will say we had and have the battle. And I think, my biggest encouragement to our writers and our team as we're putting this thing together is like, because the concept is already so abstract, the message can't be abstract. It has to be clear enough to where a child can understand it, and someone who's elderly can understand it, and everyone few and far in between.
Yeah.
And so we often write from the standpoint of our main inspiration was the person living on the streets. Sometimes that person's not educated. So it's not my goal to use big words or have crazy diction to sound cool. I have 3 minutes, and really in the whole 3-minute experience, only about a minute of it is like a spoken word element. So it's like, I have 1 minute to shift someone's heart and ensure that they feel seen. There's not the opportunity to gamble for the sake of someone seeing how creative I am. That's not the goal.
Ooh, that's
and
good.
so I think once we kind of grasp the reality of that and realize, like, we have 60 seconds to make someone feel seen, that's when we started realizing we don't have room for wasted breath. We don't have room for wasted words. Every single word and every single pause counts, and it matters. And so I think when we have the ability to weigh our project, in essence, what we're doing, then we kind of cut out the fluff, like the things that don't really matter, the things that are there for the wrong reasons. Like, we go through these things word by word and read it slowly, and we start taking things out. And I remember our first draft of like the pieces that we were writing for the experiences, like the artists, they were great. They loved them. But I was like, we have to cut this and that. And let's take that word out. Let's switch this word to that. And it takes a lot of intentionality. And it sounds very nitpicky. And it's like, Gloria, this is extreme. And I'm like, well, it's people's lives that we're working with here. This is not just like, all right, we're just throwing this for people to be happy and encouraged. I think something I've learned throughout this process is that some people really are just encouraged for the day. And then some people are encouraged to live another day. We're thinking about that person, the person who is going to listen to this, and they're going to choose to live another day because of a 3-minute experience. And so that's what makes us take so much care and intentionality and realize we can neglect the need to be overly creative with the message because the concept is already creative enough.
That's really good. Again, we just dropped the mic right there because that was, what else needs to be said, but we're not going to, because I have more questions. But no, it's a really interesting. That's a great point. I mean, you guys have 3 minutes, and so if we're talking about a musician who has a full album, they might have anywhere between 10 and 14 tracks. Yeah. If they're one of those artists that decides to put out like 30 tracks, there's that too. But they can afford to, like, on track 7, it's like, hey, let me throw something out there that's just kind of wild and really push the envelope. But that's because they have all these other tracks that, we'll get back to the main point. Same with a movie. You have a movie that's anywhere between 1.5 hours to 2 hours, and you can kind of play with that. But you guys have 3 minutes. And so I think that's a great point that I didn't think about, which is why I'm not doing it. I'm just doing a podcast. You guys are doing the
Awesome.
Hope booth. I get an hour to talk about some nonsense, but that's really interesting. So how much, because I'm always interested when we talk to creative people, the critique process, the sharpening process. Like, I'm always interested because people have different opinions and people have different ways of doing things. And like I said, we've had artists, authors, musicians, and I always like to kind of pick their brain about how they went about that process. Now, usually it's an individual that maybe wrote a book, and they take it to their circle and they say, hey, let me have it. Like, what do I need to change? What do you like? What do you hate? That's for one person in their own personal project. it is your project, you're the founder, but you have a team of what you said, 7 to 11 people, and it's very much a collective process, I imagine. How difficult is that fine tuning process? I mean, you explained it a little bit, but like,
Yeah.
is it difficult to find consensus within the group? Is it a major challenge, or are you guys pretty much all on the same page where there's not a whole lot of back and forth?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I will say we are in our prototype stage. So
Okay.
what that means is right now there's 4 experiences on our prototype, but our final concept will have 30. So our team
Oh,
grew
whoa. Okay.
from the time that we wrote the 4 to now that we're working on the 30. So when we wrote the 4, honestly, we're kind of crazy because we kind of just gambled. We didn't know like what would work, what wouldn't. We were nervous as heck. I'll tell you that though. We were just like,
I bet.
like we don't know. Like there's nothing we can look to or like even really like just look at it and say, okay, yeah, we can use that as inspiration because no one's really doing what we're trying to do, not at all, really. And
Yeah.
so we kind of just tried to figure out how can we write to someone specific that we know is struggling with the feeling of invisibility in some capacity. And so that helped a little bit. And that's when we took it to London and we had the opportunity for hundreds of people to experience it and tell us their thoughts.
Hmm.
And it was really unbelievable to know that what we wrote worked. Like
Yeah.
it worked, which is really weird because we spent, I would say, maybe like a month writing. And then our team got to Atlanta for filming. And the night before, I don't know why I did this, but I guess I just decided, let me read the pieces again. And I read them and I didn't like any of them. And I said, all right,
Oh
guys,
no.
I'm sorry, but we have to rewrite right now. And you guys have to memorize it by morning. And they were like, are you crazy? And I'm like, I know,
Oh,
I should have read this long ago. But I think because of the fact that I am the visionary, I can see what other people can't see. And so I do have to trust what I've seen already. And so as I'm reading it, I'm like, no. Things have to sound a very certain way. And so luckily our team is so flexible and they're just beasts at what they do. And so
yeah.
somehow they pulled it off and
Wow.
they killed it. And to know that those prototype pieces worked so much so that it's what we toured with, the
Yeah.
same tour. And people were like, this is unbelievable. And so now that we know what works, we've kind of created like a formula, is what we call it, a formula of how to write a Hope Booth experience piece,
Hmm.
what it needs to include. There's a lot of elements that have to go into every single piece. Because
Yeah.
I mean, part of what we're talking about is like creating this immersive experience and interactive experience. And so what can I say? How can I look at someone? What can I do in my 1 minute section that is going to help people feel seen and that is going to make them engage and interact? And so there's certain questions that every single one of the pieces in the experience have to ask. There's certain moments that have to happen in every single one of them. And so now we've got this formula. It's a lot easier, I would say, for some people. For some, it's not as easy because it's so unique and different. And I think with spoken word artists specifically, they are so used to a very certain way of writing and even performing. How
Sure.
I would say more than the writing, how our artists have to deliver these pieces is so different because spoken word sometimes has this intensity to it.
Sure.
But we're looking at people who feel invisible, they're fragile. We can't
Hmm.
talk to them like we would do slam poetry. We can't
Right.
talk to them really brash or harsh. Like it has to be a very certain tone. It's got to be a very certain way. And so I think our team now that we've got our head writer on board, he kind of understands the voice behind it all. And so he's doing such a great job kind of leaning the team into like, what does that voice look like? And then how do we kind of, I'd say our hardest thing is, though all of you guys have your individuality, we kind of need to stick to the individuality of the Hope Booth voice versus your voice,
Right.
because that's what we know is what's gonna work. And so that's probably the hardest thing that we're kind of still wading through. But for the most part, the team's doing pretty good.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I should have said this earlier, but I'll say it now. I just love everything you guys are doing. I've said that a couple of times. It's true. But obviously this is called Connectable, and our whole goal is to help people connect to our guests, help our guests get connected to a bigger audience and more people. But like ultimately, like we just love connecting with people, and we love connecting people with awesome ideas. And that's like basically that's what you guys do, is you guys connect people with hope. You guys connect people with words. You guys connect people with the use of your artistry, and just that, like the idea that you're saying, okay, I love that you guys are all doing your individual things. You guys each have your individual style, but because our main thing is to connect with the people who don't feel seen. Like we need to come together and kind of find that one singular voice, not to eliminate your individuality, but to help someone. And like you said, like you've said a couple of times, find like we need all our why is this, like helping people feel seen. And so if we can all come together and find that one voice, like you can still use the power of everybody's creativity, but it's still kind of funneling through one avenue, which I think is incredible. So I just wanted to say that I love the fact that like everything you guys do is about connection and about helping people get more connected. I think that's amazing. No, so let me ask you this: a couple of things about just like the logistics of the Hope booth. Number one, are people just kind of like staring at you guys at first, like what is this thing? Because it does look really cool. Like when you look at some of your images and videos, like it's just this. It's a colorful phone booth in the middle of on a sidewalk in the middle of a city. And I imagine that people are kind of like, like, are people skeptical when they say like, hey, put these headphones on, look in this box, like what,
Yeah,
why? Yeah,
absolutely. People are like, well, it's really amazing because we don't really have to advertise if we're ever going to have the Hope booth somewhere, because the art in itself is very attention grabbing, which is
right.
what we wanted. We wanted the design of the booth itself to tell a story and to make people look at it.
Yeah,
And it does indeed. And so
100%.
anyone that sees it, from a kid to literally, we've had people that are 90 plus years old stop and they're like, what in the world is this? And I'm like,
Wow.
oh. And so naturally, I feel like people are, I feel like just with the state of our world, people are just skeptical naturally of anything, even if it is a good thing. Like even if
Sure.
you see the word hope, you're just skeptical because one, you're used to being sold something,
Right.
or you're used to being lied to. And I think it's been really interesting to bring something in the midst of people that does neither of the two.
Yeah.
It's not something to be sold and it's not a lie, which is really incredible that people experience after the fact. They're like, oh, who knew that like this would be here and change my day? And so it's been really cool. Lots of different responses, but people ultimately they're like, I'll do it if it only takes 3 minutes. It's the timing that gets them.
Sure.
If you said any more time, they'd be like, nah, I'm not in. But once they hear 3 minutes, they're like, okay, I'll do it. I don't have much to lose.
Yeah. No, that makes a ton of sense. Well, and like you said, you're not selling them anything, which, a lot of these things, it starts off one way and then all of a sudden, I mean, can you imagine? It's like, hey, check out this 3 minute thing. And it's like, oh my gosh, tears running down their face. And that's like, if you want to see the full version, that'll be $25. Like, what is this? It would just ruin the whole message.
Right.
But, there's like so much of that type of thing out there that, I'm sure they would be skeptical, but it's such a cool thing that you guys are doing. And, when they look in, how does it work? So you said there's basically four, I forgot the word you used, for prototypes, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Do they get to choose, or does it like run on a cycle? Like, can they watch all four?
So we've got one prototype of 4 experiences on the prototype. And
gotcha. Okay.
Really what we've been doing with our prototype is kind of just picking based off of the city and kind of how we're feeling the environment is like. Our pieces, for each experience, we have an idea of what we feel like works best for certain age brackets and certain demographics. And so if we're at a university, there's one in particular that we know works really well.
Okay.
If we're in a very wealthy area, there's one in particular that talks about worth that is really, really good for that area. And so we really just kind of pick based off what we think, and then sometimes we'll let them rotate. But we did have a tour favorite that we ended up just letting be the one for majority of the tour, to be honest, which is interesting that the tour favorite was different than the debut favorite in London. So it's
Interesting.
they were very, very different. But I think that's kind of the unique thing about our final concept is that with having 30 different experiences, the experience will kind of start with something that we're calling a hope meter, where you'll get to kind of slide a meter to where you feel like you are, just kind of on this scale. And then the experience will be randomized based off of what you selected. And so it'll be a little more specific to the person and what they're going through in life.
That's awesome. Yeah, and again, I just have to like applaud you guys again for the amount of detail that's going into like reaching people. Because again, you could just go in and say, I'll just throw one of the videos on, but like you're looking at the city, the environment of that city, the culture of that city, like just all those details. Like I really appreciate that, because I think that just shows how much you guys care about, you know, touching the lives of people. So I think that's incredible. Oh, I had a question. What was it? Oh, I forgot. Yeah, it was a good question too, and now it's just gone. Oh, I hate when that happens.
Should have wrote it down.
I know it's only what 8:30 here. It's not even as late as you, so I can't even complain. I'm just losing my mind. So what are the next steps? Like, do you plan on going to other cities? Do you plan on? Would this be something that would fly like at a high school, or would that be tough to get into?
Yeah. So there's a lot of questions you just asked me, but
I know that was a horrible question.
no,
I've been podcasting for a long time. That was terrible. Okay.
is your question what's next?
That's the first question. Let's start with that one.
Okay. So what's next? So I'll start by saying what was next wasn't the tour.
Okay.
Really, we went to London to debut our prototype just to kind of gauge the impact and see, does this thing work or does it not? What do we need to change? What do we need to keep?
Yeah.
But also we knew that there were larger investors that were somewhat interested, but every investor is going to tell you, I need this project scaled. And I remember thinking to myself, how do you scale something this big already? Like I had no clue how to even do it. And that's when the opportunity to go to London came, and we had a few donors come together, and it made the whole thing happen, which is really incredible. And so while we were doing that in London, we had so many people in the States reach out and just say, hey, like, can you bring the Hope Booth to Alabama? Hey, we would love to have the Hope Booth here in Portland. And I'm like, guys, we have one. Like, we have just our prototype. No, we can't. But also on top of that, part of the goal of a prototype is to get as many people possible to experience, to give you their feedback on what was great and what was not, so that when you make your final concept, it's flawless. And so to make the final concept is costly. It's no small project. That's a big, big, big project. And so we want to ensure that we're doing our best to hear as many people's feedback, to see like, all right, let's make sure we're really going in the right direction with this thing. And so when people were asking us to come to all these different cities, we were like, well, shoot, I guess we take the prototype there, we do a tour. Like, we weren't even sure. It was just like a thought. And then we were like, no, we have to do a tour. People are telling us to come to their city. Yeah. We don't want to wait for a final completed concept to do that. And so we started a campaign for $40,000. And usually on campaigns like this, crowdfunding campaigns, if you don't make like a good percentage in the first like 24 hours, you're not going to make the goal. And in the first 24 hours, we made 2%. And so I was like, well, I guess we are not going on a Hope Booth tour, guys. Like, I don't know what to tell you. But just out of the blue, out of nowhere, a church in Tulsa donated $50,000 to make the tour happen, which was mind-blowing and wild. They didn't call us, they didn't email us, they just did it online. And I was like, what in the world? And so ended up going on the tour, and it was really incredible. We got to connect with a lot of different people. So really what's next is we want to start having these booths installed permanently come next year, at least summer 2023. But to get there, we do have to do quite some work. So we've got to finish our final concept. So we're writing all of the experiences right now, just 30 of them. We have to film all 30, edit all 30, score all 30. We have to create the app for the Hope booth. We have to get some of the digital elements in and all of the software and technological things that we didn't necessarily need for the prototype that we need for the final concept. Some of these things we don't even know how to do. We don't know who to contact. We're just like, we're just moving forward. The same way we didn't know anything before the prototype and we somehow made what we made. We're just like, all right, we're going to keep researching and trusting that the right people are going to come into this story and the right people are going to give and invest so that we can make this thing happen. Ideally, we want to be able to just have enough investors to where we can get Hope booths just across the globe, really free of charge. And we know that's a hard goal. Really, that takes a lot of people coming together just like on a donor basis because it is a nonprofit organization. And so we're probably going to start like a Patreon pretty soon to just invite people into the story of what we're doing because it is really big and it's too big for us to accomplish on our own. We're not millionaires, so that's that.
Yeah, it makes it challenging.
Yeah.
Interesting. So, and yeah, I imagine there was just a ton of people that reached out, and even I'm sure other cities that weren't on the tour. I'm sure you were just flooded with emails and DMs saying, "Hey, like did you guys come to California?"
Yeah, so we did LA and San Diego.
LA and San Diego. Okay. It seems like that'd be a great one for San Francisco too. That'd be very interesting.
Yeah, we wanted to go further. There's so many other people, like even like Portland, people wanted us to come, but we were like, man, this tour would have to be like 50 days if we were gonna go any further.
Oh, you're not lying. No, if you ever come to Sacramento, let me know because that would be awesome. I would be there. I would be there for sure. Okay, so I remembered my question and I wrote it down this time. Okay. So obviously it sounds like you had mentioned this earlier that your team is made up of Latinos and Black individuals. So when you guys are creating these art pieces, obviously you want to give hope to everybody. Everybody wants hope. But as you guys are creating these pieces, is there a part, and this maybe is a terrible question, but like, is there a part of you, like part of your heart that is really kind of focused on like the Black community, the Latin community, like as you're creating these things, like, are you hoping that it inspires something within those communities? Or is it really just, hey, this is for everybody and our focus is everybody? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. I would say it's kind of a both and thing. Sure. I think naturally because of the fact, someone asked me in another interview, they said, how is it possible that you guys are writing something where people feel seen? And I said, well, we're writing from our personal life experience. So I know that as a Black female, my personal life experience is going to speak to another Black female naturally. Yeah. So I don't think that's even something I necessarily have to force. Yeah. I think that's just a byproduct of my being. And so I think it's something unique is that it's going to reach everyone for sure, but it's going to reach people who look like me. And I think that's what I like, even when I traveled a lot doing spoken word on stages with a lot of different conferences and organizations, I realized that there was no one else that looked like me even doing what I was doing that I could look to or be encouraged by or feel inspired by. And so I think just the presence of the minority in general does a lot of impact in someone else's heart that looks like that person as well.
Yeah. Well, I imagine that it's gotta be such a cool thing, especially for people that are younger than you know, and that are seeing what you guys are doing. That's gonna be just like a tremendous, just a tremendous thing to like aspire to be, right? Like they're seeing what Gloria is doing. It's like, oh, this is amazing. Like, and she looks like me. I could do something similar and kind of send them down that path. Like, I think it's just a really cool thing. So, yeah, that's awesome. But that makes a lot of sense. Like just naturally the message that you're putting out there, the way you communicate it, and the perspective that you're seeing it from is going to connect with people because there's a lot of people out there that are similar. And so it's just going to naturally connect. So that makes a lot of sense. I got focused on that question and I lost another question again. Man, good thing I'm not part of your team where I had to like come up with this whole thing the night before again, because I would be like, you know what, I should probably quit. I will see myself out of this team.
I'm surprised that they did not quit.
Well, yeah. Now, so okay, so on the flip side of that, like, have you had a lot of people reach out to you, like other artists, other spoken word artists, say like, "Hey, how do we get involved?" Because I imagine and I could be wrong, but from my perspective, I would have a really tough time because I'm pretty protective over like this podcast and certain things that we do.
Yeah.
I would have a tough time just like starting to like add people that weren't a part of the initial group. Like obviously, you get to a certain point, like you said, if you're trying to get as big as you guys are, the direction you're heading, eventually you're gonna have to start adding some people to the team to assist with that. But like I imagine, like this is your baby, this is your project, your vision. Um, like what are those conversations like when people
Yeah.
reach out, it's like, how do I get involved with this? Like, I'm
Yeah.
sure it's tough because maybe it's not. Maybe you're like, hey, everybody's welcome, but like, I'm guessing that's not the case.
No, it's tough because I think about so I'm a middle child, and
Okay.
anytime we welcomed a new family member into our family and the household, everything shifted.
Hmm.
Everything culture wise in our family even shifted. And it required teaching someone to understand the culture of our family.
Hmm.
And so I think we are in a space now where we have such a tight timeline where I don't know if there's enough time to teach someone the culture of our family
Yeah.
and have them a part of the family,
Yeah.
because they can't really be a part of the family if they don't understand the culture. We'd have to go back to them understanding the why, like it being so big. Because I think a lot of times people can see a project and it feels very pretentious and
Yeah.
they want to be a part of it because of that
Yeah.
reason. And so for us to keep the purity behind what we're doing, we really have kept a really tight knit crew. And while on the tour, we've found people who we have just said, you are already carrying the heartbeat of what we're doing.
Hmm.
Those are the people we want to bring in because you've already adopted the culture before you have to come here. And
Yeah.
so I think that's a really, really big and key thing is like for us, we do need a few more new people to come and help us so that we can really impact the most amount of people possible. But we are not so desperate that we'll take anyone. We want to ensure that we keep the purity of the project.
Right. Because it's not, I mean, based on everything you've been saying, it's not enough just to be a really talented artist.
Yeah,
Not for
correct.
that, not for this. Cause it's like
Yeah,
you can find really talented people anywhere. But like you said, if they don't have that same heartbeat, then it
yeah,
throws the whole rhythm off and it's
so
not gonna
important.
work.
Yeah,
Yeah. And I think people would feel it too. You know what I mean? Like if that started becoming the case, or
yeah,
if, um, if it became something that was for profit, right? And you guys started, like I said, charging people for that, like it would start diluting the entire experience. And then
exactly.
it's like, was this still about hope, or is it
Yeah, and that's what you don't want. We don't want to taint something that was just so beautiful to begin with that
right?
really, like, I mean, now that we've seen the impact of it all, it's like, man, we want to stick with this momentum and this energy forever. Like
Right.
we never want it to be tainted.
Yeah. Uh, so the question I had earlier too was, so it seems like this would be something that like a high school would be interested in, but I don't know if it's something that they would necessarily feel comfortable bringing in. I mean, I guess, sometimes schools are kind of, uh, they get nervous with certain things like this. I feel, and my wife's a teacher, and just hearing some of her stories, it's like there's certain things that they're like, yeah, it's great,
Yeah.
but we don't know if this would be the best idea to bring in here for a variety of reasons. Have you been approached by any schools or any organizations like that? I mean, you mentioned prisons at one point too. So, I mean, you guys are obviously thinking about not just this being on the street, but being in some of these different places where hope is really necessary. But as far as schools, have you been approached by any organizations or places like that?
Yeah, mainly universities, not
Which makes
really
sense.
high schools. Not any high schools, actually. Mainly universities that are 1000% on board and excited. And I think
Yeah.
that actually was some of our favorite tour stops were the universities, which was super cool.
Yeah.
But we surprisingly haven't gotten a ton of like pushback yet. I mean, I assume maybe it'll come. I don't know. I think maybe people have just seen enough of what we've shared, like as far as the impact, that they're like, what do we have? What do we have to lose? There's not much to lose at this point.
Yeah, for sure. Have you guys been approached by prisons, or is that like is it like a dream right now?
No, so all of these things we're connected with
Ooh, okay.
some pretty great people in these spaces.
Yeah.
So that's been really awesome because one of the things we have really been honing in on our team is that we don't want to show up as the superheroes or the saviors at any of these places
Hmm.
because we just created this a year ago, and there are organizations and individuals who have been on the ground doing the hard work of seeing others for years upon years before I was even born.
Hmm.
And so we really created this to be more so like a supplement to the work that people are already doing because they're committed to these cities. I don't live in any of these cities, so even like knowing where to go and where to place a booth and what types of experiences will work for these cities, all of that comes by way of relationships with people in these cities, in these universities, in these prisons, because we know that people aren't available 24/7, but these booths can be. So they
Hmm.
can be, in essence, a supplement to the work that people who are already committed to doing. They're doing it and coming alongside of them instead of trying to replace them, in essence.
That's awesome. Well, I feel like that's what makes you guys so successful. I mean, I can speak to just our conversation right now. I can't speak to the rest of your team, but I feel like I feel pretty comfortable saying that they're probably all like this. Like you have a humility to you where you're not coming in puffing your chest saying like, "This is the best thing ever," and if you guys don't bring this into your organization or to your city, like you're missing out on something absolutely amazing that I created, and it was all about me. Like I don't get the sense that, with that about you at all. It's just like, no, like you said, we're not trying to take over anything. We're trying to assist and enhance what you guys are already doing. So I feel like, I mean, just from my outside perspective, I feel like that's why you guys are so successful right now, is because there's not this, it's not an ego driven thing. It's not like I said, it's not a showpiece. It's not like, hey, look at what an amazing artist I am.
Yeah,
It's,
encouraging.
hey, we're trying to help people. We're coming in with a humble heart. And, I just feel like anybody who does that for that reason is going to be super successful. So, um, yeah, I'm just excited to continue to follow you guys. I know it's late for you. I think we are pushing midnight for you. We'll try to get you out of here before midnight.
Okay.
Um, my one last question for you, and this is something that we ask people at the end of the show because it is connectable. We like to get people connected. We call it our connection suggestion. It's basically a person, a brand, an artist. It really could be anything, an organization that you feel like our audience should be connected with and should be aware of. Does anybody come to mind, or anything come to mind that you would like to suggest for us today?
Um, well, it depends on if you're wanting something that's related to this conversation or unrelated to this conversation.
Hey, it can be both. If you have one for each, it's completely up to you. The floor is yours. So
Sweet. Okay. Well, something that's related to what we're doing. I recently got connected with a guy in Tulsa who's leading something called BeHeard.
okay,
And it's an outreach organization where they essentially have mobile barbershops, mobile showers, they have mobile like shopping, mobile everything
wow,
for the homeless community in and so they show up and it's almost like it's such a cool experience. You show up and you get to put your name on a board, you get to shower, you get to get your hair done, you get to put on fresh clean clothes, you get to charge your
wow,
phone, you get to do arts and craft, you get to go to resources and find out how you can get food stamps and just assistance for living. And so this kid that started it is literally a kid still, and
really,
they're just crushing it and killing it. And it's been amazing just to watch the journey of someone doing something with the same heartbeat that we're doing, but a very different method. And
hmm.
so it's been really cool to see people doing that. But yeah, he's killing it. Be Heard in Tulsa is something worth following. And something
Awesome.
unrelated, I don't know if
Yeah,
anyone's a podcast fan, I'm assuming,
I
because
hope
you're
so. I've at
here.
least one. If you're our fan, that'd be great. But there's others out there. Enjoy the other ones too.
You're a podcast fan, but
Yeah.
I do not like long podcasts. Usually, listening to them is hard for me. I'm sorry. We're going an hour into this. I hope that you're enjoying this podcast. But
Wait,
there
hold on.
is a
Is an
podcast
hour too long? Sorry, is an hour too long for you?
to listen.
Oh no. Oh no.
No, No, it depends. If it's something that's really like interviews I could do, but if it's one person just talking, that I cannot do.
Oh no, yeah, that's brutal. Okay. I
Sure.
should have asked first. Like, do you hate
Okay, so
podcasts long?
we're in the clear here. That's what I'm saying. We're good to go.
Okay.
Um, there's a guy who leads a podcast called Commoners Communion,
Okay.
and they're no longer than maybe 10, 13 minutes or so. And he is a poet in New Zealand, and he usually just starts every podcast with a really simple mindfulness activity and then kind of dives deep into that topic. And it's something that has helped me so much in my journey and my walk. And so I think if you're someone that's trying to learn how to be mindful and how to have just like better practices in your day-to-day life, Commoners Communion is a great podcast to listen to.
Awesome. That's great. And we have a ton of people that love the shorter podcasts. So that's actually perfect. 10 to 13 minutes.
Yeah.
You're speaking to everybody. That's good.
Okay, that's good.
Awesome. So where can they follow you? Where can they follow Hope Booth? How can they get connected? All of those things.
Yeah, so you can find everything either at my personal Instagram at Gloria Umanah, or you can find everything at the Hope Booth. It's at the Hope Booth on Instagram, on TikTok, YouTube, and our website is hopebooth.com. And so there you can find out how to give, how to join the movement of seeing other people, how to watch some of our impact videos that we have, and our documentary that's coming out in June.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
How is it being released? Or can you say?
Yeah. So we'll release it via YouTube TV.
YouTube TV.
So,
Okay, perfect.
I don't want to give the wrong date, but sometime in June, our documentary from the tour will come out.
Awesome. Okay. Well, you guys have a lot of things to look into. If you're listening to this, make sure you follow all those things. You will not be disappointed. Like I said, it's been a lot of fun for me to follow what you guys have been doing. So I would definitely encourage all of you to go check all those things out. I'm looking forward to the documentary. Please let me know. I mean, we'll obviously be following you, but we would love to share that and do all that when that comes out, because I think it's like I said, just amazing work that you guys are doing. And like I said, I'm hopeful that one day you guys will come out this way, and I would love to check it out for sure.
Hey, we'll do it. You know someone that wants to bring the Hope Booth to that city and can make it happen financially, we will fly that steel thing all the way there.
I'll start making some calls. We'll see. Okay. We'll see who can do it. But this has been really, really fun. I appreciate it. And good luck with everything in the future. And I'm just, like I said, I'm excited to see where this goes. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching the show. If you enjoyed that episode, make sure you like it, share it, and hit the subscribe button to get a new episode every week. We'll see you next time on the Connectable podcast.